Welcome to Pen and Perspective, where the story always knows more than it's telling. Every word is intentional. Every silence holds a truth. Let's get into it. Final update. The expose, the arrest, the release, the list. The first time I heard about the expose, it wasn't from Terrell. It wasn't from my wife. It damn sure wasn't from anybody who loved me. It was from inside. I was in the day room, half watching the TV, half watching nothing, when a dude I'd never spoken to slid past my table and said, "Hi, Trendon." My name isn't Trendon. I didn't even look up at first, thought he was talking to somebody else. Then he doubled back like he'd been waiting for me to react. "Yeah, you," he said, grinning. "You famous now, superstar." I stared at him. He laughed like I was slow, like I was behind on my own life. "You on the internet, bruh," he said. "Whole story. You in that accident. You the dude." I didn't ask questions right away. That's how you get played in here. You ask too much, you become entertainment. So I just sat there, jaw tight, letting the noise pass through me. But the word kept coming. Superstar. Famous. He and that lawyer about to be rich. Somebody said, "You got you a fan club now, boy." At first I thought it was just inmates being inmates. Anything to break the monotony. Anything to make a man flinch. Then I noticed something else. Officer Dean let up. It wasn't kindness. He didn't turn gentle. He just shifted. No extra bumps on the way back from the shower. No accidental shoulder checks. No quiet threats murmured when cameras couldn't catch his mouth. He still walked the same. Still wore that same bored superiority like it was stitched into his uniform. But he stopped touching me, and that told me more than the jokes did. Something outside had moved. Something loud enough that even a man like Dean had to adjust his hands. My cellie Sean came back that night with a look on his face like he'd been holding a secret and finally got tired. He didn't sit right away, just stood there for a second, phone tucked in his palm like it was contraband and truth at the same time. "You know why they calling you Trendon?" he asked. I stared at him. He sighed and walked over, lowering his voice even though the room was loud, even though it didn't matter. Then he held the phone out. "You're trending, man." On the screen was my name, not Trendon. Walter, the trending story, and it was Kendall. She is talking about how a man could get framed so clean it looked like paperwork. About me. I scrolled slow because my hands were shaking and I didn't want him to see. I read it like a man reading his own autopsy. There were no names like people expected. She didn't drag the whole group into the sunlight. She did something smarter. She described the cousin who looked harmless, the friend who signed something he didn't read, the business that benefited the most, the 9 minutes at the gas station that never made sense once you stared at them long enough. It wasn't gossip or emotion, it was a pattern. And while I sat there staring at that screen, I realized something. Everybody knew now, not just my wife or my circle. Everybody. In here. Out there. People who didn't know me. People who didn't care. My name wasn't just a case anymore, it was content. Sean kept watching me like he expected me to explode, but I didn't. I couldn't. I just felt exposed in a vulnerable way. Like the walls that had swallowed me had suddenly turned transparent and the world was peering in, pointing, deciding. I slid the phone back to him and sat down heavy. That flicker I'd been fighting since the note showed up at Sandra's door, it came back. Not hope, but movement. That same afternoon I got a call from Terrell. His voice didn't carry excitement. "Terrell don't do that, not with real things." "We're filing," he said. "Now. We're not waiting. We're moving." I closed my eyes. He kept talking like he could hear my thoughts trying to sabotage me. "They're going to try to stall. They're going to try to slow walk. They're going to try to bury it in procedure. We're not letting them." I swallowed. "You think this is enough?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded in my own ear. Terrell exhaled. "I think it's the first time they didn't control the narrative," he said, "and that's more than we had last time." When the call ended, I sat on my bunk and stared at the wall like it might answer something. Then I heard Dean's footsteps in the hallway. He stopped outside my door longer than usual. I didn't look at him and I didn't give him the satisfaction, but I felt it. That shift. He didn't have the same confidence anymore. He wasn't the man pressing his power into my ribs. He was the man checking the temperature of the room to see if he could still get away with it. Days later, word trickled in. That's how it goes in here. News doesn't arrive, it leaks. Dante got arrested. I didn't hear the details clean, just pieces, passed from mouth to mouth, but the energy around the name was different. Not like rumor, like consequence. I kept seeing it like a timer counting down. It took a few more days before the real news reached me. Your case reopened. I heard it like a sentence first, like a phrase that didn't apply to me. Then it landed. Reopen meant reviewed. Reviewed meant examined. Examined meant people might finally have to explain their shortcuts. I didn't see Dean after that. Not once. At first I thought he was off shift, then I thought he switched units. Then I realized he'd been moved or he'd been pulled. Either way, the absence felt like a confession. After that, Marcus reached out. He told me Tyler was coming home. He wants to talk to you, Marcus said. Not to defend her. He just wants to speak. Tyler was family, too. Something in me wanted to hear him, so I called Tyler on the burner. His voice came through the line and I knew him immediately, even though years had passed. "Cuz," he said soft. I exhaled through my nose, half laugh, half exhaustion. "Look at you," I said, "coming back like you ain't been away for 15 years. "I know," he said. "Man, I'm not here to act like she didn't do what she did." That surprised me. We talked longer than I expected. Not about the case first, about family, about how he'd been watching from far away and hating himself for not being closer. He told me straight. "I'm not asking you to forgive her," he said. "I'm asking y'all not to be upset that I'm not making her deal with the consequences alone." That sat heavy. So I did what I could do. I made the way clear. I called the people who mattered. I told them Tyler was in town and to sit down for dinner. Knowing they sat down mattered a lot to me. Then Taylor got arrested. That part hit me wrong, because my brain was still catching up to the idea that my blood could be part of the thing that ruined my life. I sat there remembering her as a kid, remembering family cookouts, remembering her laugh, and then remembering the gas station. 9 minutes. I kept seeing it like a timer counting down. Things sped up from there. I blinked and I was out. Once I was home and the noise slowed, Marcus called again. "Lunch," he said. "Kim's at 1. He didn't ask if I wanted to. He spoke like it was already decided. When I walked into Kim's, I saw Brian, and for a split second, my whole body tensed like I was back inside. Because Brian wasn't supposed to be in this part of the story. Why wasn't he in jail? He looked up when I walked in. He looked older. Not in the face, in the posture. Like his guilt had been sitting on his shoulders for a while. I was told everything. Not the cleaned up version, not the I didn't know version, the real version. How Dante asked him to sign something. How it was framed like a wellness concern. How we just want him to get help. How Brian didn't read it the way he should have. How he told himself it was small. How he told himself it was nothing. And then how he realized it wasn't nothing. How he went to T. Greaves. How he chose to burn his own safety to give Marcus something to move with. I listened without interrupting, because this was bigger than friendship. This was my life. When he finished, I didn't feel one emotion. I felt two: anger and something like gratitude that I didn't want to admit out loud yet, because gratitude doesn't erase harm, but it does complicate it. I left Kim's knowing the group needed to hear this, and I already knew they wouldn't want to. So I did what Sandra always says I do when I'm dead serious. I called everybody and didn't ask. I told them we were meeting with Brian. I said no. Every version of number. Not yet, not ever, not him, not after Kendall put it out there. And I understood, but I said it anyway. "Give him 30 minutes, I told them. "Trust me on this." They didn't do it because they liked Brian. They did it because they love me. When Brian sat down with them, it wasn't a redemption tour. It was confession. And everybody reacted exactly how I expected. Coldness, distance, that stare people get when they're trying not to hate you for something they can't undo. Then Ayla did something I didn't see coming. She forgave him. She didn't say she trusted him like before. She didn't say everything was fine. She just said, in her way, that she saw what he risked to bring me home, and she couldn't pretend that didn't matter. The room went quiet in a way that shifted the air. Everybody looked at her like she'd lost her mind. And I sat there watching my baby sister be who she's always been, even when it cost her pride. That's when it hit me. That's why she's my sister. She's fire, yes, but she's also hard. Terrell hit me up a few days later to let me know Taylor was pleading out. He didn't say it like vengeance. He said it like fact. I went. I sat there in that courtroom and kept my eyes forward. Taylor was there, trying to look steady and failing in her hands. I didn't look at her. I knew if I did, I might feel something I didn't have space for yet. And I couldn't afford to be soft in the middle of something still unfinished. When she pled, it wasn't dramatic, it was administrative, like my life had been ruined with paperwork and now it was being repaired with paperwork too. That night, after court, after phone calls, after a long emotional meeting with my parents, I found Sandra sitting with her legs tucked under her, wrapped in one of the throws we never used before jail. The TV was on but muted, just light and motion, nothing demanding attention. I sat beside her without saying anything at first. She leaned into me like she'd been waiting all day to do that. For a while, we just breathed together. This still feels unreal, she said eventually. Not shaken, just honest. I know, I said, but it's moving. She nodded, fingers tightening slightly in my shirt. That's all I needed to hear. We didn't talk about revenge. We didn't talk about who did what or how deep it went. She had carried enough of that weight already. Tonight wasn't for answers. It was for recalibrating what our life was going to look like now that I was back inside it. I got an email earlier, I said after a moment. Contract proposal, mixed-use project, came out of nowhere. Her head lifted. Interest sparked immediately. That part of her never shut off. Send it to me, she said. I'll look at it in the morning. I smiled, small, familiar. We'll go over it together, I said. No rush. She rested her head back on my shoulder. I don't need everything to make sense right now, she said quietly. I just need us to be okay. We are, I said. Later that night, after Sandra went to bed, the house shifted again. Isla came in first, keys still in her hand, energy tight and focused. Kiara followed, calm as ever, eyes already scanning the room like she'd been mid-thought before she even walked through the door. Sandra didn't come back out. This wasn't her burden. Ayla opened her laptop on the kitchen table. Kiara pulled up a chair and sat. Nobody asked how I was, and they already knew. We're not starting with feelings, Ayla said. We're starting with facts. Kiara nodded once. I sat across from them, elbows on my knees, watching the screen light up the room. Names, dates, connections that didn't look like much unless you knew what you were looking for. The company, the tow yard, the quiet overlaps, the people who never showed up on paper but kept appearing in outcomes. This isn't about loud moves, Kiara said. It's about pressure, in the right places. Ayla scrolled, stopped, then looked up at me. They thought you'd come home grateful and tired, she said. They thought that was the end of it. I didn't respond right away, and I thought about the hospital room, the cuffs, the silence, the way 2 years can be taken without anyone raising their voice. I leaned forward and pointed at the screen. First? Nah. He's too big to take out first. But fuck dude, though. Kiara's eyes narrowed slightly. Who then? Ayla tapped the next name. The one who thought he was untouchable, she said. The one who moved like nobody was watching. Kiara's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. That makes sense, she said. That's where it starts. Outside, the city hummed like it always had. Inside, something finally felt aligned. And now, I knew exactly where I stood and who was standing with me. Epilogue. The hidden figure didn't watch the video right away. He knew better than that. News like this needed to settle before it could be assessed. Noise first, reaction second. He let the alerts pile up, let the calls go unanswered, let the group chats burn themselves out before he ever lifted a finger. By the time he pressed play, the internet had already done what it always did. Clipped it, shared it, argued over it, turned it into something people felt entitled to an opinion about. That was fine. He preferred chaos at the surface. It kept attention away from where it actually mattered. The video opened without drama. No music, just her face. Calm, grounded, unrushed. He recognized that immediately. This was someone who had already decided what the truth was and was now saying it with her chest. He leaned back slightly as she spoke. No names or outright accusation, structure, timelines. Who benefited? Who moved? Who signed what? who stayed clean on paper while everything around them got dirty. He felt the irritation before he felt the concern. Because she was careful. Careful meant dangerous. He watched the section about the shop without blinking. Reggie's shop, the revitalization zone, the permits that stalled, the pressure that followed, the vandalism that didn't take money, didn't make sense if you didn't understand intent. That was the mistake, not the plan. The emotion behind it? He'd known better. He always knew better. But proximity had blurred the line that night. Walter had been too close to the center of it, too visible, too protected by community loyalty. Initially, he felt like the shop would be a soft warning, a message. Instead, it became a breadcrumb. He exhaled slowly through his nose as the video continued. He wasn't exposed, not really. Nothing in the video pointed directly at him. No fingerprints, no signatures, no trail that a prosecutor could follow without already knowing where to look. He paused the video halfway through and stared at the screen, not at her face, but at the frozen frame of context. The implication. Investigations didn't start because of videos, but videos changed what investigators felt justified looking into. That was the risk, not consequences, scrutiny. He finished the video without expression. By the time it ended, he already knew what had to happen next. Assets would need to be restructured, timelines adjusted, certain partnerships quietly cooled off. The shop was gone for good. That opportunity was burned, not because it failed, but because it had been seen. He hated wasted resources more than he hated exposure. And this had been waste. A lapse. He stood, walked to the window, and looked out at a city that had no idea how often it was rearranged without its consent. This wouldn't end him, but it would slow him, and slowing down meant others would try to move faster. He didn't smile, because the most dangerous thing about people who told the truth quietly was that they didn't stop once they were believed. And now, someone out there besides Marcus had learned how to make noise without ever raising their voice. You've been listening to Pen and Perspective. If it sat in your spirit, let it linger. If it stirred something in you, don't ignore it. I'm Miana DK. And before I put my pen down, tell me, whose perspective should I sit with next?